Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode review. Today, I'm reviewing the fourth episode of season 5 of Beavis and Butt-Head, titled Choke. And overall, this is the 93rd episode of Beavis and Butt-Head that released. So, what happens in Beavis and Butt-Head Choke? Beavis and Butt-Head are watching TV, and in the set between them is a thing of chicken nuggets. But after eating too fast, Butthead then begins choking. Beavis keeps mistaking what Butthead is doing for something different. So then, later on, Butthead tells Beavis about what's happening, and Beavis is like, "Yeah, what can I do? What do you want me to do about it?" And then Butthead tells Beavis to call 911, and Beavis says, "Well, you're closer, you do it." And then he says, "No, you do it." And I don't know why, but Butthead's voice when he's choking kind of creeps me out a bit, especially when he says, "It sucks." Yeah. What else do I say about that? Anyway, let's get going. So Beavis then tries calling 911, and he, they the operator asks if he's ever done the Heimlich maneuver. And he's like, "No, I haven't." So then Beavis goes on trying to find ways to help Butthead, but at home Butthead is just continuing to choke, and that led to the "It sucks." It sounded like Butthead's actor Mike Judge was on the verge of crying while saying that line. Yeah. And then Beavis still thinks about Butthead choking, and then Beavis then says he wants to go get some nachos. So then, when he's outside Maximart, Stuart comes over and asks, "Where's Butthead?" And then Beavis says, "I don't know." And then Stuart asks Beavis if he can have some nachos. Stuart says, "Yeah, give me $1." So then Stuart does. And then he goes into Burger World and asks, "Hey, is there a sign around here?" And then Butthead is still continuing to choke back at the house. And then later on, Beavis comes through the front door and says, "Hey, Butthead, look, I got a sign that says all employees must wash their hands before returning." And then when he puts his leg on Butthead's throat, he coughs up the piece of chicken and recovers. Beavis then says, "Dude, you almost made me trip." And then Beavis finds the piece of chicken that Butthead choked on and eats it. The episode ends as it shows Beavis also choking. So, this was a long recap. You could have just watched the episode at that point, but I'll keep going. This episode kind of creeped me out a bit because of the whole "this sucks." The fact that Butthead is just choking while Beavis is just doing his own thing is just kind of creeps me out a bit. And I don't know if this was intentional or not, but this is one of the only episodes where Beavis is nice to Stuart. One of the few episodes where this happens. Because most of the time, Beavis or Butthead is a jerk to Stuart. So, it's nice that Beavis gave Stuart his nachos. And this episode like I said, this episode is kind of insane. But my favorite part, the part I laughed at the most, was when Beavis was walking through the front door and he said, "Hey, Butthead, I got the sign that says all employees must wash their hands before returning." That line right there just really sums up how funny Beavis can get. The part I laughed at the most in that line was when he said returning, and then he just put his leg on Butthead's throat, and then boom, he's not choking anymore. And the funniest part after that is when Beavis picked up the piece of chicken and he starts choking as well. That part right there almost made me die of laughter. That part is so funny. So, I'm gonna have to give Beavis and Butthead Choke a 10 out of 10. It's definitely rewatchable. It's got a lot of funny parts in it, and like I said, the acting is really good in this episode. So there you go. Beavis and Butthead. Choke gets a 10 out of 10. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.